Hi-Fi manufacturer Primare relies heavily on the Swedish term lagom, God, I hope I got that right, in order to describe their products. And lagom, roughly translated, means just the right amount. So what does lagom have to do with anything? Well, we've been living with Primare's Pre35 Prisma preamp and matching A35.2 amplifier for months now. Of course, they are beautifully built with a design language that is 100% Primare and largely unrivaled in a marketplace still infatuated with large black boxes and obnoxious backlights. The Pre35 and A35.2 are so simple that they're almost forgettable, but in the best possible way, allowing one to focus on other, more important things rather than the gear itself. And maybe that's what Primare is going for, or maybe not. Suffice to say, I have left both pieces out, connected on our bench for longer than most because honestly, I forget they're there. Let's start with the preamp. The Pre35 Prisma is a modular, full balance stereo preamp with analog and digital inputs plus wireless and streaming capability. It has 3 RCA and 2 XLR for a total of 5 analog inputs. The Pre35 unfortunately does not come with a phono input or dedicated built-in phono preamp, which I think is a miss. But it does have 3 pairs of preamp outs. That's 1 pair of RCA and 2 XLR outs. This makes the Pre35 super flexible, allowing you to expand its capabilities either by using multiple amplifiers, subwoofers, or both. Well, except for the fact that the Pre35 doesn't have any internal bass management, so you'll need to deal with bass management on your subwoofer. Now, on the digital side, the Prisma has a built-in DAC that uses an ESS ES9068A chipset tied to its 4 optical, 2 coaxial, and single USB inputs. Now there's also a single coaxial digital out to send a digital signal from the 35 to a third-party DAC, though I'm not sure why you would want to do this, but the option is there. Not only are there a ton of digital inputs, you also get support for a number of wireless connections. There's network support via Ethernet or Wi-Fi, plus you get support for AirPlay, Bluetooth, Chromecast, Spotify Connect, and even Roon. Okay. Roon ready. The 35 also features Primare's own Prisma Control, whole home audio and connectivity app, which lets you stream popular music services from your smartphone and make basic adjustments to the preamp settings inside the app. Shifting focus to Primare's A35.2 power amp. It's a balanced Class D stereo amplifier that produces 200 watts into 8 ohms and 400 watts into 4. Now, it can be switched into a bridge mono mode that ups the power all the way up to 800 watts into 8 ohms. The A35.2 uses Primare's UFPD technology, which provides, according to Primare, immediate and sustained high power output with very low distortion across the entire bandwidth, resulting in a naturally fast, clean and agile sound. If you have caught any of our Class D amp reviews, you know that some Class D amps, they run into issues when driving speakers with varying impedances or when playing back complex music signals played back at high volumes. The A35.2, at least on paper, appears to get around these issues, thanks to Primare's UFPD2 module as well as its new power supplies. What else? Oh, yes, you get both balanced and unbalanced inputs, as well as easy to understand switches for features like signal sense and bridge mono mode. You can even adjust the gain of this amp plus 6 dB when it's in mono mode. With all that out of the way, there's a couple of things we need to go over with regards to setup. To get the Primare to work with your system, you first need to get the Pre35 onto your home network. Now, I use the Google Home app to wirelessly connect the Prisma to our network, and once you've done that, you're going to have access to the entire Prisma system through the app. Theoretically, you can also use AirPlay to connect to your home network, but in my tests, I could never get this feature to work. The AirPlay procedure always timed out, which is why I use the Google Home app. The great thing about the Home app is you can also use it to control the Primare and stream music using voice commands, and this was by far my favorite way to interact with this system. Again, if you run into issues with the AirPlay setup, Google Home is going to be the workaround, but beyond that, the setup is pretty straightforward. With the preamp connected to the network, I evaluated this system with my various favorite loudspeakers, including the new SVS Titans, KEF R11 Metas, and the insanely expensive Bowers & Wilkins 801 signatures by running either a single A35.2 as well as 2 amps in dual mono. Regardless of the speaker connected, the Primare drove them to perfection. No typical Class D gremlins to report. Now, before we jump into sound quality, we need to talk about the Primare's manual control. While it's technically possible to scroll through and even select different tracks and/or music services on the Pre35 using the included remote or the physical buttons and dials on the preamp itself, the screen is so small that the menu tree is kind of difficult to navigate, and I never really used it unless forced to. The app is just a way better way to go, or in my case, voice control over Google, which is kind of a shame because the physical feel of the preamp's control knobs and buttons are among the best in the business. Alrighty, now we can talk about the sound. In a nutshell, this Primare combo ranks among the more neutral 1-2 punches I think I've ever heard. Are you looking for a system that appears to have no color, tone, or character? This may be the hi-fi stack you've been waiting for. It is such, and I mean such, a blank slate that is honestly difficult to explain what it gets right as opposed to what it gets wrong, because technically speaking, it doesn't do either. It's neutral through and through. And like I said earlier, the A35.2 amp had no issues controlling any of the speakers we tortured it with, including the 801 signatures, which can dip to as low as 3 ohms. Routing signals through the Prisma to the amp didn't appear to emphasize or even take away the feeling of bass from any of our 3 speakers. I listened to some of my favorite audio demo tracks, everything from A Perfect Circle to Lady Blackbird, and all of the texture and detail in those songs were present. Now, I have heard what I feel is more impactful, or call it grippy bass, that is most likely the result of an amplifier, or better yet, its designer, attempting to impart a sense of flavor to the signal, something I honestly do not believe the Primare does, and that is to its benefit. The mid-range of vocals and instruments, they were pristine, altered only by the speakers that were connected. As a reviewing tool, the Primare gear earns high marks. I never felt as if I was reacting to the amplifier or the preamp, making it easier to grade a speaker and its unique character traits. The sound through either component was neither warm or cool, forward or laid back. It simply was what the music called for. And I fully admit that this may leave some of you feeling a little because too often we look to our gear to give us something, a taste or a tone of our own preference or biases. And if this sounds like you, this is not the equipment for you. I mean it. Carl, if you whip out your credit card to buy this stuff, you get it home and go, it sounds boring. You're not going to get any sympathy from me. Welcome to what neutral sounds like. And isn't neutral, you know, the music, what this is all supposed to be about? Thankfully, there is something to talk about when it comes to the treble. After listening to a lot of Class D amps, some cheap and some not so cheap, the Primare's top end is composed, linear, and non-fatiguing. Even when torturing speakers with full volume runs of Audio Slave, Velvet Revolver, or the often sibilant Alanis Morissette, the Primare didn't worsen any of the treble issues perhaps you've come across before. Now, I will admit, the Primare's uppermost top end, it errs on the drier side, meaning metallic instruments like cymbals don't exactly shimmer quite the same way that they do when listening to a good Class AB amp, but that's about the only critique I have when it comes to the Primare's high-frequency rendering. And this brings me to SOUNDSTAGE and Dynamics. Perhaps bad news if you're a card-carrying member of the DAC of the Month Club, but the Pre's internal DAC is good enough that I don't really think you're going to need a separate one. All of the separation, detail, and delineation one could want in a stereo soundstage is on full display here, provided your speakers in your room allow for the vast, cavernous stage. Listening to live recordings, for example, Nirvana's Unplugged, Kurt Cobain is right smack dab in the middle of the three-dimensional space, as well as the general ambience of the room itself was just present and accounted for. And that's not something you always get when listening to other setups. Now, I have heard more defined, or call it etched, performances with respect to absolute sonic contrast, but I would still rank the Primare stack high if you value soundstage definition and separation. Dynamically, the Primare A35.2, it hangs, but it's not as agile as what I believe most people expect when thinking of Class D, and that's actually a really good thing, because rarely does music or a note start or stop absolutely. There's air, there's decay, and the Primare hangs in there just that little moment longer than a lot of Class D amps do, and that lets you actually hear and enjoy those subtle changes in dynamics. It still isn't the same as Class A or AB in my book, but it's close. I gotta say, I really like what Primare has done here, but I'm guessing you can hear the but coming. Well, here it is. Especially at $5,300, the preamp should have come with an HDMI ARC port and a built-in phono preamp. I mean, their absence is pretty hard to justify. While Primare and others may look at HDMI as a home theater connection, it's not. It's a digital one. And if you're going to market your product as being a digital lover's dream preamp, you have to include all of the side dishes, not just the ones you know how to cook. And while I applaud the numerous digital inputs and streaming options, they feel a little bit like an afterthought, crammed kind of into a product that initially never had to deal with things like an app or track selection, never mind metadata and cover art. While streaming music through the Primare, it still sounds great. The user experience, at least when having to rely on, say, the remote control or the manual controls on the preamp itself, it's woefully limited and frustrating at best. And while we're on the topic of streaming, the Primare app is a welcomed addition and it is a solid first step. But if you're a hardcore music streamer, you may find the app a little bit underwhelming. It's 100% functional and even largely reliable, but when it comes to features, you could do better. What else? Oh, user adjustability is kind of lacking. You get balance, but no tone controls, never mind EQ or bass management. All things that I kind of believe are expected nowadays, especially at this price point, even if minimalism was the goal. Oh, and while I applaud the customizable signal sense feature of both the Pre and the Amp, they're certainly not operating on any timeline I'm familiar with. Maybe it's a Swedish thing, but it's just kind of faster to turn them on manually. As a result, and I hope this doesn't sound too critical or worse, mean-spirited, as great as the Primare system can be, it's not an out-and-out winner in any one category. More beautiful than a lot of the competition, sure, but value for money even among similarly priced pieces. For example, while it's not Primare's sonic twin, the far less expensive Yamaha 2000A integrated amp proved to be every bit as good, giving users more usability while maintaining a relatively high design standard. Another integrated, the ANTHEM STR, has even fewer streaming and wireless features than the Primare. However, the ANTHEM has built-in room correction, a very good phono preamp, and style that rivals the Primare. Not to mention, it has the power to drive even difficult speakers like the B&Ws for less money. And suppose you're a fan of digital or Class D. In that case, the Technics SUG700 or R1000 even, are both waiting in the wings for about the same or less money. Both are excellent sonic choices, albeit a little bit less powerful ones, but they offer similar features, plus they both have fantastic phono stages while also infusing their performance with an element of simplicity and style. Oh, and I'm sure there's already about a half a dozen of you reminding me of the endless number of little Class D diamonds in the rough that are so cheap y'all can afford to just throw them away. I'll just say this much, at least the Primare didn't catch fire. I have really enjoyed my time with the Primare Pre35 and A35.2. I have relied on them pretty heavily in evaluating many other products you've undoubtedly seen on this channel these past few months because they are just very good at what they do. I believe the designers at Primare have understood their assignment, and for the right listener, these products will undoubtedly be just right. A minimalist hi-fi dream come true. They just might not be everyone's absolute pick. So that's it. That is now my review of Primare's fabulous preamp and matching amplifier. Now it's time for you guys to tell me what you think. Leave a comment down below. You never know, could end up in Friday's Unplugged episode. In the meantime, if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead and ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Christy's left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you've continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we do here, and both of us, thank you very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that is it for us today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on Friday's next Unplugged, where you'll get maybe Christy's thoughts. And until then, thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and see you next time.